What's up, people on the internet? My name is Multiplier, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about EQ when mixing. Now, EQ is often misunderstood, so hopefully I'll help you out with your confusions and shit. It's something I think it's easy to take for granted, and then suddenly you realise 6 months later you thought you knew what was going on and you really don't. So yeah, what I'm going to do is illustrate the main misconception with an example, and then hopefully that'll stay in your brain. Now, also, I know a lot of you think my tutorials take too long, and I think they do as well, so I'm going to try and keep it quick, because also I want to go skate. So let's get straight into it. Now we got an audio track here, which is a vocal. I'll just quickly show you.
Dance if you can't dance, just do this.
And then if you look in the spectrum analyzer thing, we've got the range of frequencies that were going on. Now, probably the first thing you want to do when you start EQing stuff when you're mixing is get rid of the low end on anything that isn't a kick or a bass. Because basically, anything that isn't a kick or a bass, the low end, and I'm talking say 100, 200 hertz down, isn't contributing to the sound. All it's doing is like getting in the way, basically. So you want to clean it up. Just make sure it's not there. Sometimes you don't need to, and that's the important bit, but more often than not, you need to get rid of that low end mess. Because even though, say, you'll see here, it's anything from about minus 45 decibels to minus 55 decibels, you can't really hear it, but when you add up, say, 7 or 8 tracks with that low frequency rumble, what that does is it just creates a mess for the bass and the kick to sit in, and you lose your headroom, and it's just sometimes you get phasing issues, and it's just a nightmare. Get rid of it so the kick and the bass have room to kind of play by themselves, which is a lot nicer. So how to do that? We've just got basic Ableton Live 9 EQ. Works the same in pretty much all EQs like this. Stick a steep high pass. You pretty much want a steep one. The mellow ones just don't really do a good enough job. Then what we do is we just simply drag it out as far as we can until it starts to change the sound of the original, and then we pull it back a bit. And then sorted, we've got our high pass. That way we've taken out as much as we can without it actually changing the sound anyway. So I'll just quickly drag it out. Haven't got my headphones on, so hopefully this sounds alright.
Dance if you can't dance, just do this. 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 Dance if you can't dance.
Cool. Hopefully that didn't change the sound. Should have already stuck my headphones on, but oh well. So yeah, we've got a high pass sorted, and now when you look at the spectrum, you'll notice it tapers off a lot.
Dance if you can't dance, just do this. Dance if you can't.
So yeah, you can see now we haven't got that low frequency mess going on. It kind of all goes away. Now it's worth noting, I think the noise floor is somewhere around like minus 90, minus 85 decibels. So basically, as long as you get the low end below, say, minus 80, minus 85, that's good enough. You don't need to get it any lower, because chances are, if it's any lower, then that's just the mathematical algorithms telling you something that isn't really the case. So yeah, just get it below minus 80 is a good place to start, and then you'll be sounding good. More often than not, in sample packs, a lot of the samples like have low end like noise shit around like minus 40, minus 50 decibels. You can't hear it, but you need to get rid of it. Just leave room for the kick and the bass. Sorted. Right. You may have heard that before, but now the really important bit, so you don't get the wrong idea. If we just rebounce this clip out now, and then stick another spectrum back on.
Dance if you can't dance, just do this. Dance if you can't dance, just do. Dance if you can't dance, just do this. Dance if you can't dance, just do this. Dance if you can't. Dance if you can't dance, just do this. Dance if you can't.
Right. Annoyingly, whenever you start and stop the clip, sometimes the low end thing bounces up. That's just an error. That's just a problem with the maths. So if you have a look at the spectrum while it's playing, you'll see now the low end just tapers off still.
Dance if you can't dance, just do this. Dance if you can't dance, just do this. Dance if you can't dance, just.
Oh, it's stuck there now. So yeah, you can see now with this new clip, we wouldn't need to do any high passing because the low end is already not there. Now that's really important, because it could have been the case this was our original clip, and if we got in the routine of simply dragging out a high pass because, well, we think we should, it will only add negatively to the track, because the low end is already not there. So if you try to get rid of it anymore, sometimes it's fine. Sometimes you end up with just basically the same result and no negative effects. But sometimes what it does is, I think technically due to what's called filter ripple, if you high pass something it can increase the kind of the height of the wave, like how far the meter's peaking, and then you lose a bit of your headroom. So if you don't need to high pass it, don't think you should. In fact, don't just because you think you should. It's really, really important. What you do with the EQ depends on the source material. So there's no formulaic things like you need to do. And a good way of explaining that is a lot of the time you don't need to EQ like various different channels to get them to fit together. You just need to find things that fit together. It's pretty simple. Like if you have to do loads of really radical EQing to get kind of, say, I don't know, your vocal and your synth sound to fit together, maybe just choose a different synth sound. I mean, you shouldn't need to do anything radical because all EQ does is it changes the source material. Now, if you can get the source material to be good in the first place and work together, you don't need to do any EQ. I've done a lot of tracks. In fact, most of my tracks, I don't do any EQing apart from getting rid of the low end if I need to. And that's really, really important. Like, same goes with compression, actually, while I'm talking about it. You don't need to compress stuff if the source material was fine in the first place. Yeah, everyone does, because most people think that, oh, well, you're supposed to compress, so let's just compress it anyway, ignoring the fact that, oh, it might have been all right in the first place. So that's really, really important. That's the main misconception. People think you're supposed to do stuff, so they do it anyway. I guess the other misconception is, say, if you've got like a high pass, then for whatever reason they think this means that only information in that little section goes through and then somehow everything below there is free. But that's not what's going on. You have to think of it in terms of what this EQ is actually doing in terms of reducing the low frequency information. So yeah. But yeah, that was the main point, is it really depends on what the source material is as to what EQ you use. And once you figure that out, everything else starts to happen a lot easier. So yeah, that was the main bit. I should probably tell you some other useful little tricks and tips and how you actually might want to EQ in a track. A really common thing is if you've got a snare. Everyone has snares. Why did I say if you've got the snare? Oh, I got a text message. I'll ignore that. You normally got the fundamental hitting somewhere around, like, say, 200 hertz. I'd probably drag one out to show you, actually. Isn't that pro of me? Just grab. I think this one's pretty doinky. Yeah. This one's a super doink. Right, you see this peak? It's called the fundamental. You can see it's 176 hertz. Normally it's around 200, but most decent snares have this fundamental frequency. And what you want to do is, a lot of the time you need to make room for that in the track, because if you've got, say, the snare landing around the same time as the kick, if the kick's got something happening around the same frequency as this fundamental of the snare, then they'll kind of land on top of each other, and then all your meters will go mental, and then you'll clip and you'll just cause a nightmare for yourself. So sometimes what you need to do is you need to figure out the fundamental frequency of the snare. Just use a spectrum analyzer for that. Pick something like, I don't know, either this one or, yeah, that one will do good. And then drag your frequency till it's at the right one. So in our case, it would be, say, around 170. 169 will do. And then drag the Q around until it's taking out enough room on the other tracks for the snare to hit. Now, you wouldn't put this on the snare because you just get rid of the fundamental note, but it can be a particular problem with kicks. So you'll find you can take out, say, however much around that frequency of the kick to kind of almost leave room for the snare. Now, it's worth noting you don't always have to do this, which is, again, comes back to it depends on the source material, what EQ you use. A lot of the time, you can just pick a kick that leaves enough room for the snare without any EQ. That's kind of important. Similarly, on a load of your tracks, if you need to get rid of any around 200 for the snare, first of all, make sure you need to, and then, yeah, just use this kind of EQ shape. But yeah, other than that, like, I wouldn't personally bother with EQing to mix because you think you should, unless you've kind of done everything else, really, because a lot of the time it's just a case of getting the sounds to fit together. And whether it's choosing the right sounds in the first place, or compressing things in the right way, or I don't know, panning things in a certain way. Like a lot of the times you can get to, if you have, say, a synth and a vocal that are fighting for the same frequencies, like lean one way, lean one the other way. Like I did it in another tutorial, I think. But yeah, just use the panning thing here. Just tilt one way, tilt one the other way, and you'll find they'll still sound pretty central. But yeah, suddenly they'll find they fit together, and you haven't had to do any really stupid EQ that kind of destroys the character and the sound of either track. So yeah, that's basically, well, I've said basically twice in a row. That sounds stupid. That's EQ. You may not have found this that helpful because I haven't given you that much kind of advice as to, well, you need to, on your vocals, boost this little bit if you want some presence and shit, because fuck that. I'm not going to tell you to do that because it all depends on the source material. That's the most important bit. If you're finding, say, you want more presence in your vocal, or you want more, I don't know, bite in your snare drum, have a look online and figure out what frequencies you need to boost and then do it that way. But it's really, really important, which is why I've said it like a million times. Don't habitually do anything because you think you should. Like, if you've got a snare, don't boost 200 hertz because high ranking told you to, or whoever told you to, because that's what I see everyone doing as well. It's like, oh, I got a snare, boost 200 hertz. Well, you know what? If it's from a decent sample pack, they've already done that. You don't need to boost it anymore. Like in this sample, for example, let's sample, for example, that rhymes. Ready for this? Boom. Wait. That's pretty much perfect. I don't need to boost 200 hertz or 180 hertz anymore because they did it in the first place. If I boost it, all that's essentially going to happen is I'm going to have to turn down the channel, and then all this kind of high-end information has just gotten quieter. But that high-end information is part of the character. It's already balanced, right? So I don't need to do any more boosting. And that's super important. Get that in your head. It all depends on the source material. Now, if I'd had a really shit sample to begin with, maybe I would need to boost 200 hertz, but in this case, I don't need to. Like I've used this snare in quite a few tracks, and I've had a lot of people say, like, I'm not even just saying this, I have genuinely had quite a lot of comments say, oh, how did you get that snare so good? Like, how did you EQ it? Or, oh, that kick's amazing. How did you EQ it? Or how did you compress it? And you know what? I just chose good samples to begin with. That are good samples and they fit together, and then you don't need to do anything. It's like, makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Like, I remember Porter Robinson saying, for example, as well, if you spend half an hour choosing a kick, don't need to fuck with a kick anymore after that because you spent half an hour choosing it. Now, it's an important thing to get in your head. Don't routinely do shit. That's also partly why if you have, like I use isotope alloy for virtually all of my EQing, just because I like it. There's a lot of presets that come with like EQ curves, but they're kind of stupid because it all depends on the source material. So yeah, just bear that in mind. Yeah, and if you want to say, I don't know, improve the sizzle on a hi-hat, just look up the frequency. There's tons of charts online. Literally just look up instrument frequency chart character or description or something, and there's all sorts of different ones that tell you roughly what frequency range does what. For example, I'm looking at a chart now, so I could tell you the quote-unquote, the scratch on strings is 7.5K to 10K. The boom in vocals is 200 hertz to 240 hertz. The presence in vocals is about 5K. All that shit you don't want to like habitually do. But if you do need to say improve the presence on a vocal, you grab your EQ, find 5K, boost it a bit, maybe change the Q, do it all to your liking. But yeah, use your ears, and it's something that will just take time to get right. There's a reason why the best mixers in the world are the best mixers in the world, and that's not because they really know what they're doing. It's just because they've spent 20 years doing it and they have an instinct for it. So that's EQ. Right. Links and shit to everything below. Yeah, like follow my label, buy everything, buy my tracks. I need the money, to be honest. Just PayPal me money if you're bored. Or yeah, just like, is there any tutorials you want me to do? Let me know. Yeah, cool. Right, I'm gonna go skate. Sun's out. And all the little kids are coming back from school soon, so I want to get a skate session before skate park fills up with little kids on their scooters. Right. Bye, people. Have fun EQing shit. And remember, I've said it like 50 times now. What you do with the EQ depends on the source material, so don't just routinely do shit because you think you should. Sweet.